Big mystery surrounding Beatle Paul McCartney. A rumor that he is dead, killed 3 years ago in an auto accident, and a double put in his place. For a report on how it all got started, here is Caesar the Now.
Hey there, I am Caesar the Now, and today I will be talking about the Paul is dead theory. Now, for those who don't know, the Beatles are a popular English rock band in the 1960s, and band members are comprised of John Lennon, Ringo Starr, George Harrison, and of course, Paul McCartney. Now, as far as the theory goes, in November 9th, 1966, Paul McCartney and the other band members were recording late one night when they had an argument, and Paul drove away angrily, lost control of his car, and was decapitated. Luckily though, in 1965, before the accident occurred, Brian Epstein held a lookalike competition, and a man of the name William Campbell Shears, aka Billy Shears, entered the competition and won. Immediately after Paul's accident, police and reporters were bribed into secrecy, and Billy Shears went under surgery, and the other band members taught him how to play so that he could take Paul McCartney's place in the band. On October 12th of the same year, a caller to a Detroit radio station called WKNR-FM asked DJ Russ Gibb, who is well known for elevating the Paul is dead theory, to play some Beatles music containing hidden messages. This inspired a student, Fred Laborde, to write a satirical review of the Abbey Road album. Instead of writing a review of the album, he detailed a number of clues that alluded to Paul's death within the album cover. And supposedly these clues were left behind by the other band members because they felt guilty about covering up Paul McCartney's death. His article spread throughout the US and the UK via radio stations and other college campuses. This led to a flood of calls to Beatles management asking if Paul was okay. Of course, both Beatle management and Paul McCartney denied this rumor.
If you see another person that looks identical to you, run away and hide.
Now, in this part of the video, I will list some of the clues alluding to Paul's alleged death, and will only list the best ones, or rather the most interesting ones. Now, the first ones I will talk about are on the Sgt. Pepper Lonely Hearts Club Band album cover, which is littered with them. First off, this whole scene just looks like a funeral, with all the cutouts and the band members standing around what seems to me a flowery grave. And then there's this cutout of all the band members as their younger selves, and what seems to me Paul McCartney consoling Ringo Starr while looking down at the flowery grave. Not really a clue, but I just thought it was interesting. Now, the first clue I will talk about is the other band members are facing towards Paul and Paul is facing forward, signifying that the other band members are pallbearers. You know, these guys. The next clue is that if you look above Paul's head, you will see a hand. This could be symbolizing a priest blessing Paul. This isn't the only instance of hands over his head. In the Magical Mystery Tour booklet, we will find 4 more photographs of hands over his head, like this, and this. Next, let's take a look at what everyone's holding. Everyone but Paul is holding brass instruments, while Paul is holding a black instrument, of which the color signifying death, which we'll see again in another clue. Directly below them is a bass drum with the words Lonely Hearts written across it. Now, if you hold the mirror across the middle of the words, it turns into a hidden message with the number 1 and the word 1 representing the month November. And next to it, the Roman numeral 9 representing the day, followed by the words he died, saying that Paul died November 9th. Below that is a flower guitar, a left-handed guitar, of which Paul is the only band member to be left-handed. Now, when you open up the record album, you will see a full band photograph, and on Paul's right sleeve, you will see a patch with the letters OPD, which can be interpreted as officially pronounced dead. Next, on the back, you will see a photograph of all the Beatles with the lyrics to all the songs in the album written across the photo. First, an obvious clue when you are looking at it is that all the band members are facing forward except Paul. And the other thing is that all the band members are relatively the same height, except in this photo, Paul is seen to be significantly taller. Almost to say as if he's ascending into heaven. Then also written next to Paul's head are the words "Without You" from the song "Within You, Without You." Now for one of my favorite clues, if you look at each of the band members' hands, they are positioned in a way that spells out the word love. George Harrison is pointing, making the letter L. John Lennon is making the V, and Ringo Starr is making the letter E. And with Paul turned around, there is no love without Paul McCartney. Also interesting enough, George is pointing at the words Wednesday morning at 5 o'clock as the day begins, supposedly the time Paul died. In the next set of clues I will talk about are in the songs of the album. At the beginning of the song, "With a Little Help from My Friends," we will be introduced to a man named Billy Shears, aka the man that replaces Paul in the band. In the song "A Day in the Life," John sings about a car crash, saying the words, making a direct reference to Paul's fatal car crash. That about wraps up the clues for Sgt. Pepper's, and we'll now talk about the Magical Mystery Tour. In the Magical Mystery Tour booklet, where we found the hands over Paul's head, we will find a photo of him with a sign below him that has the words, "I was." Then in another photo in the booklet, we will see a photograph with the whole band. Paul has his shoes off and the shoes are laying next to a drum. According to some people, they say that his shoes have blood on them. And I'm going to tell you right now that this clue is really dumb because the red on his shoes are just a reflection from the drum. Moving on. Now these next set of clues are hidden messages, of which the Beatles have been known to do. And the messages can be revealed by playing the song backwards. This is accomplished using a technique called backmasking, and has been used in songs like "Tomorrow Never Knows," "I'm Only Sleeping," and in the single called "Rain." Now in the Magical Mystery Tour album, specifically in the song "I Am the Walrus," if you play the gibberish section of the song backwards, you will hear "Paul is dead, ha ha." Then in the song "Glass Onion" in the White Album, where the photo of Billy Shears comes from, by the way, we will hear John say, "Here's another clue, the walrus was Paul." Like he's handing us another clue to the theory, sort of like a meta lyric. Moving on, in "Strawberry Fields," towards the end, you will hear John say the words, "I buried Paul." Here we have a music video of the song "Your Mother Should Know," and in this one it is straightforward with the symbolism of death. If it isn't obvious, all the Beatles except Paul had red roses while he has a black one. Like I mentioned in Sgt. Pepper's, this is another example of the symbolism of death with the usage of the color black. Then in the song "I'm So Tired," again you will hear some gibberish, and if you play that backwards, you will hear John Lennon saying, "Paul is dead, man, miss him, miss him, miss him." Then in Revolution 9, you will hear someone say, "Turn me on, dead man," several times.
Turn me on, dead man. Turn me on, dead man. Turn me on, dead man. Turn me on, dead man.
Also, a little knowledge nugget here. In the 1970s, Christian groups tried to ban backmasking through legislation. Of course, they were unsuccessful, which led to record burnings and protests, which are all part of the Satanic Panic, which is another topic for another day. And if that wasn't interesting enough, backmasking can be traced back to a 1913 book by Aleister Crowley, who is right there in the Sgt. Pepper's album cover. He recommends that those interested in black magic would do well to learn how to think and speak backwards. Moving on, up next is the Abbey Road album cover, which already, just by looking at it, has several things to talk about in this one. For starters, John is ahead of everyone, dressed all in white, looking all Jesus Christ-like, with Ringo behind him dressed all in black, resembling an undertaker. Behind Paul is George, dressed in all denim, resembling a gravedigger. Then Paul is seen falling behind Ringo, who is holding a cigarette in his right hand, who is supposed to be left-handed, which isn't too weird What is weird is that he is barefooted, saying that he is the corpse and is also notably out of step with the rest of the band members. And if you couldn't tell, this is representing a death scenario. The Volkswagen Beetle in the background has a license plate that can be read as 28 if, meaning Paul would be 28 years old in 1969 if he had survived his car crash.
That's like you're part of the problem.
Pal.
And you need to go talk over me.
I can see why some people would believe the theory to be true, but because we are humans, we love to find patterns that leads us to the conclusion that something is up. But usually the simplest answers are the right ones. So with that, I will explain away each clue, starting with Abbey Road. In an interview with Fred Laborde, he admitted to making up all the clues found in the Abbey Road album cover, which pretty much eliminates all the clues for that one. But I'll go into detail in each little clue. Then as to why Paul was barefooted, he just forgot his shoes and came in flip-flops. Then when it came to take the photos, he just threw off his sandals. Also, with the order that they were walking in and why he was barefooted, there's no significance. They took 6 photos and they thought that one was the best one. Then for the Volkswagen, the photographer did try to get the owner to move it, but they couldn't find them, so they just left it in. And as for the license plate, it doesn't read 28F. It reads 281F. Moving on, as for the turn me on dead man part, it could also be chalked up to coincidence. Not that it doesn't sound like what it does. It could be just referencing something completely different. Who knows? We may never know. Then for the part in I'm So Tired, when you hear John say, Paul is dead man, miss him, miss him, miss him. What he's actually saying is, Saint Monsieur, Monsieur, how about another one? Next up, I will explain all the clues found in the Magical Mystery Tour booklet. For the photo of Paul with the words I was under him, it actually says you was, which doesn't make any sense. Maybe it was an error and it actually meant to say I was you. Who knows? So that one can be left unexplained. For the Paul is dead haha part, it was made up on the fly. What you're actually hearing is Shakespeare's tragedy called King Lear. It was being played on the radio that John had turned on and was messing with.
Oh, slave, thou hast slain me. Villain, take my purse. If ever thou wilt thrive, bury my body.
Next up, Glass Onion was written before the Paul is dead theory began. In the Magical Mystery Tour TV special, the walrus was actually John, not Paul. He later says in an interview that John wrote it as a joke in the Playboy April 1981 issue. The joke being that John always picked Yoko over Paul, which makes no sense to me. But okay. So that will be another unexplained clue, I suppose. In Strawberry Fields Forever, you can even look up the lyrics. John is saying cranberry sauce, not I buried Paul. This clue will fall under one of those things where if you're looking for it, you're going to find it. Now, for the part in A Day in Life when they reference a car crash, what they're actually referencing to is the death of Tara Brownie, who died in a car crash in 1966. Also, for the Reprise song, when they mention Billy Shear's name, they just said his name because it rhymes with years, and they're just trying to get to the next song. Now, finally, back to the front of the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts album cover. Like Abbey Road, there was multiple photos taken. Paul isn't always in the center of the shot, which means he's not always under the priest's hand, and he's not always holding a black instrument, and he's sometimes seen holding a brass one. Same goes for the photo in the back. For the hidden message in the bass drum, the UK standard for dates is day, month, year, not month, day, year like it is in the US. As for the guitar flowers, an assistant suggested it during the shoot, so that one wasn't even thought of by any of the band members. For the photo, when you open up the album, the patch is kind of folded, so it doesn't actually say OPD, it actually says OPP, which stands for Ontario Provincial Police. So that about wraps it up. Like I said, most of these are just coincidence, and usually the simplest answers are the truth. Although some of the clues do fit in so perfectly, but ultimately those fall under one of those things where if you're looking for it, you're gonna find it. Paul's Mini Cooper was involved in an accident, but was being driven by Robert Frazier's assistant. And Paul wasn't even in the car when it happened. He was in another car with Mick Jagger. There's also zero evidence that an accident occurred during the time he supposedly died, and Paul can be seen on vacation during that time as well. It was a really cool theory, however, the whole thing was just too far-fetched considering that Capitol Records always denied it, and no one who worked there ever came forward to confirm the theory was real. And the most damning piece of evidence is that replacing someone like Paul would be very difficult. Firstly, Billy Shears would have to be on par with Paul's talent. And secondly, his family and friends would have to be convinced to keep up the lie. So Paul did not die November 9th, 1966. The competition held to replace him never took place. And William Campbell Shears never existed. Maybe. So in all, Paul isn't dead. So I first heard of this theory a long time ago, back when I was a freshman in high school. My friend told me about it, and it was probably the first theory I ever heard of, really. So it's fitting it should be my first video too. And I just want to thank you all for watching. It's been a long time coming, finally making my first YouTube video, full and all. And I just gotta say, join,
Die!
like, subscribe,
Subscribe!